Yeah, Bulen Musa taille si démocratie. Bulen Musa abuse démocratie. Moi sunu dole si bireumi. Tame votas kate gamba tireumi. Olu manendinya, kuneka gena dem foot rexi jama. Bunyu hair, bunyu hulo, ninsama sunu jama.
Bulen ties to democracy. Do not get tired of democracy. Welcome to panel discussion 3. Dreams for the Gambia. I hope you have been following, being attentive to everything that has been discussed here about different guests and dignitaries. And we are at the last but not the least segment, and as we've been doing from the beginning, we will start from my right and allow the gentleman to introduce himself. Kind of introduce yourself to the people.
All right, thank you very much. I am Muhammed Krubally, Gambia's first and only visually impaired magistrate and lawyer by profession, and the chairman of Gambia Federation of the Disabled. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're glad to have you here. And on my left,
hello everybody, my name is Cherno Gaye. I am a poet. I'm a law student at the University of the Gambia. I'm also a youth leader, currently the coordinator of our National Voice and the lead advocate for Charter 70. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you so much. Wow, that's a lot of things you do for a young man. The mother must be very proud of you. That's the Gambia we want.
Yeah, the Gambia we want.
Yes, that's the Gambia we want. We want Gambia where young men are taking the lead in their respective field, in their respective careers, and making a difference so that others can follow suit.
Exactly.
We're very happy to have you here. So panel 3, what we discuss is basically the Gambia we want, our dreams for the Gambia. My first question goes to you, kind sir. In your take, your perspective of things, your thought process of things, what Gambia do you want for yourself, first and foremost, being a person with a PWD, a person with disability? What kind of Gambia do you want for yourself relating to your condition?
Okay, thank you very much. This is a pertinent question. As a person with disability, I noticed that the Gambia indeed is a small country though, but with actually great potentials, with human resources that can actually turn things into positive ones. As I actually live in the Gambia and as I have traveled far and wide across the globe, I have definitely come across a lot of things which absolutely I would really want to see into the Gambia. Some of the things are, I want to see the Gambia to be a very inclusive and participatory country or society wherein at least nobody will be discriminated against, especially persons with disabilities who have the same or equal fundamental rights and freedoms just like others. The country should actually be inclusive in the sense that the rights that are available for everybody will be accorded to persons with disabilities in terms of integration, in terms of provision of facilities and equipment, in terms of accessibility, for example, to public buildings or private buildings, accessibility in terms of any kind of information or facilities. I would actually also want persons with disabilities to be inclusive, let's say, into the system in all kind of programs. For instance, education opportunities should be given to persons with disabilities, at least to excel. We're talking of employment, for example, persons with disabilities, the large number of persons with disabilities in the Gambia are not actually given the opportunity of employment. We are talking of health and healthcare services, at least to persons with disabilities. We're talking of transportation that are actually very much difficult for persons with disabilities to access, at least to move from one place to the other. We're talking of habilitation and rehabilitation services, at least for persons with disabilities. For instance, when a wheelchair user maybe actually has a problem with the wheelchair, At least there should be at least an established center in terms of rehabilitation that should help persons with disabilities to get this done. We are talking of a lot of opportunities or accessibilities in terms of persons with disabilities. It is actually established fact that integrating persons with disabilities in the society is really an essential part of any government, because a government who does not really have facilities or who do not create accessibility for persons with disabilities definitely is not a successful government.
Absolutely. From the beginning of these panel discussions, we've been focusing on why elections are important for different groups of people, from persons with disabilities to young women, elderly women, young men, elderly men. One thing I want to ask you is, to you as a person with disability, why do you feel elections are important to you? What does voting mean to you?
Voting absolutely is very important. For instance, I would first make reference to Section 39 of the Constitution of the Gambia that absolutely establishes, the right at least of an individual to vote and be voted for. This absolutely does not discriminate anybody. It even includes, let's say, persons with disabilities in general. If you look at Section 33 of the Constitution of the Gambia, by which we are governed, it actually prohibits discrimination against any group of persons. So election is about giving person an opportunity to make a choice. And when you are making a choice, you are absolutely ordained to make right choice, but not a wrong choice. Especially in this context, an opportunity is given to you to participate in the election to ensure that you choose your right leader or the right person who is going to lead you at least for a certain period of time. So obviously it is very important, the election I mean, at least by giving an opportunity to an individual to ensure that you exercise your franchise. Because I just want to talk general, but I always want to be specific in terms of according right to persons with disabilities. For example, it is very much important, as an individual, when you attain the age of majority, at least you go out and exercise at least your franchise. That is, make sure that you do a critical thinking, choose a particular person of your choice, vote for him or her, because this individual whom you have voted for is really going to lead you for a long time or for a short time or whatsoever. But think of that person as an individual that will be able to make a difference in your life, difference in the lives of the citizens of a country. So election is definitely very much important. That is the hallmark, that is a determinant, the litmus test for that individual, whether he or she will perform well to ensure that at least your country will progress or to ensure that your country will fail. So it is your election, your voter's card, that will give you that opportunity to determine which leader you're going to choose, whether that leader will perform to ensure that your country progresses, or whether that leader will underperform to make sure that your country actually does not progress. So these are the reasons why elections are important, yeah.
I'm sure you must have voted in the elections before in the past, so you have your experiences with the elections. Can you kindly share with us some of your experiences as a person with disability? Was it agreeable? What was the challenging part of your experiences?
Well, the challenging parts are definitely numerous. I always compare the Gambia with many other countries where I've traveled before. I know that, yes, I have casted my vote, at least to ensure that the Gambia really changes, the Gambia really realizes at least positive and progressive changes. But for instance, if I may first make reference to the infrastructure in terms of feeder roads or in terms of highways, at least I feel that at least performance is not being done in order to at least bring construction in terms of highways or feeder road, very good networks, at least into a standard one in the Gambia. As I'm speaking to you, it is very much difficult for a non-person with disability, talk less of a person with disability, to walk everywhere freely, because everyone is muddy, everyone is with pit holes, stagnant waters. It is indeed very much difficult. At least performance is not done in terms of that aspect. If you look at accessibility purpose, for instance, facilities are supposed to be installed, let's say, in places to allow the visually impaired or other persons with disabilities, at least to have access to both those private and public buildings. Whether the facility is going to be installed in audio format or in braille format, or in order to have elevators or escalators to allow other maybe physically challenged individuals, is also lacking. You also think of other facilities and equipment that are supposed to be provided by the government to make sure that equal treatment for all is the end of the day is another thing. Job opportunities, I realize that in this country, definitely jobs are not being created, for people at least to be engaged to earn a living. This one absolutely applies across for both persons with disabilities and non-persons with disabilities as well. Like the capacity is not really, being introduced to create jobs, let's say, for the youths,
Can
those
you
that are...
share with us, sorry, we'll come back to this, just hold that thought. Can you share with us one of your very own personal experiences going to the polling vote? What was one of the things that you felt really needed to change, a very personal experience when you were voting?
Well, as a visually impaired, in terms of election, when going to cast your vote, like we feel, for example, ballot boxes should be accessible in the sense that there need to be braille or tactile format that should be pasted on ballot box, where a visually impaired like me or any other person can quickly walk in, at least feel the ballot box, know that this is the color of the ballot box, this is the name of this particular candidate that has been pasted on the ballot box. That will give you an opportunity at least to vote for the right person, because we're talking of secret voting. So absolutely you need not engage a third party into your voting process, at least to know that this is what you voted for. This is one of the challenges as a visually impaired. But in general, sorry to say, as I've said, sometimes the places where the polling stations are and where ballot boxes are installed is not also accessible for the physically challenged. Because sometimes if you come with your wheelchair, because the way the boxes will be, you can't access the place. They either maybe have to ensure that unless you give your marble to somebody to go and vote for your choice, and the question will be whether that person will vote for that choice or not is a question. And sometimes the distances of where polling stations will be and where other persons with disabilities are will not actually be convenient. So it will discourage them even to exercise their franchise to vote for their right leader. Absolutely.
I mean, one of the things we discussed here earlier, before I move on to my very able-bodied gentleman here, one of the things that we discussed earlier was the fact that we all know that elections help us to elect a president that presides over the executive, significantly a cabinet that creates policies and laws. Understand? Obviously, there are things in the Constitution that cater to persons with disabilities, but in the case of the Gambia, for example, we know that enforcement is usually a problem. How, in your understanding, do you feel like persons with disabilities engage in voting at a National Assembly election level and local council election level? Do you feel like persons with disabilities actually come out and turn out to vote in those elections as well, or not?
Yeah, absolutely. It is really dependent on the convenience, whether the whole or the entire voting processes will be convenient to persons with disabilities. If you look at the Constitution of the Gambia, 1997, by which we are governed in Section 31, subsections 1, 2, and 3, it only talks about three things in terms of rights of persons with disabilities. It only talks about the rights of persons with disabilities in terms of health, employment, and education. So the proviso to that one only states that in any judicial proceedings in which a person with disability is a party, then the procedure shall take into account his or her conditions. I am happy to really announce here that on Tuesday, 6 July 2021, the National Assembly members of the Gambia have unanimously passed Persons with Disabilities Act. So the President of the Gambia, within the 30 days requirement on the 25th July has assented to that particular act. So meaning that likely now, persons with disabilities also have a guaranteed legislation that we can rely upon in the event of any infringement or encroachment of our rights.
Right.
So we can say now we are covered by a specific legislation.
Okay.
So we can always, actually institute an action or a lawsuit for respect, promotion and protection of our fundamental rights and freedoms. And if you look at the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the Gambia is a signatory or is a party to that convention. The Gambia has signed or ratified that convention since 2015. And all the fundamental rights and freedoms that are contained in the UNCRPD, for example, Section 29 of UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, talk about the persons with disabilities' right to participate in political activities and in public life.
Yes, I was about to come to that. How do you feel about persons with disabilities being not only voting but participating in standing for elections and taking part in the electoral process?
Well, I know that we do exercise our franchise in voting in presidential election, parliamentary election, council or mayoral election. We normally participate.
Okay.
But as yet, I have not yet seen any person with disability at least contesting for a particular position, either being an independent candidate or contesting at least on behalf of a political party.
Would you say that is part of the dream that you want?
It is. In fact, a lot of discussions have been going along since we know that our established rights to participate in political activities in political life as being guaranteed by statutes. For example, this current Persons with Disabilities Act, we're talking of Section 55 that has clearly addressed that one. So as persons with disability, we will also think of putting up a candidate, whether we will speak to a political party or particular political parties to ensure that at least opportunity is given to us. Alternatively, we are going to put up an independent persons with disability, at least to contest for a particular position, especially in terms of parliamentary positions or council or mayoral positions, because we feel that we are all equal before the law. We have equal rights and should enjoy equal rights and freedom like anybody in terms of taking part or participation in elections.
Of course. Do you, I'll give you throw one more question in your way before I move on.
If possible.
Do you feel the people that are currently in power are and can represent persons with disabilities more than or as much as a person with disability being in the hot seat themselves?
Yeah, we always have this belief that we persons with disabilities should always be at the forefront in order to drive our agenda. Because we understand our own issues than anybody. We can explain our issues than anybody. We can enlighten and sensitize anybody. You understand? Pertaining to our own issues or challenges or conditions. So obviously, opportunities should always be given to us to stand at the forefront, to sensitize people, to drive our own agenda. Because otherwise, if somebody also does it for you, may not actually be perfect or may not be really fitting, in the context of persons with disabilities.
We're talking about the Gambian dream here. What do you think about a Gambia? What do you think about a Gambia where, let's say in the parliament, for example, you have women, you have men, you have persons with disabilities, you have every section represented there, but passed on to by the National Assembly as a law that with every election there must be at least one or two persons with disability in the parliament, women in the parliament, whatever the representatives needed, but must be there, must be passed as law.
I must say you are very intelligent.
Thank you, sir.
As if you have in fact already read the draft constitution that had been currently killed in the parliament. That's the right perspective to use. During the process of the draft constitution, persons with disabilities were consulted, at least at every stage. we have really advanced a lot of issues and rights that should be worthy of consideration in the draft constitution in the event it becomes successful. And before they finalize the draft, we have actually done a position paper that should be considered, by the drafters to be included in the draft constitution for persons with disabilities. And goes so good, if you look at section 58 of that draft constitution, at least most of the rights that we have recommended for persons with disabilities were included. Most pertinent or prominent is, in this constitution, at least there should be 2 seats for persons with disabilities in the National Assembly, 1 man and 1 woman. Although it is unfortunate that the constitution was not successful, but even currently there has been $20,000 from the UNDP that should support these 2 seats for persons with disabilities if the constitution is going to be amended, and of course I think the quota system for women.
Okay.
So this is why I say you are intelligent, as if you have read, or maybe as if someone even must have told you that at least it will be pertinent for persons with disabilities to have 2 seats in the National Assembly.
Well,
this will be the case.
I do.
Yes.
My research is
absolutely, and this will be the case. Seriously.
And we're going to come back to you. When we come back to you, we're going to go a little bit more into details as to some of the steps that can be taken to not only have laws passed, because it's one thing to have laws passed. There's another thing to have laws enforced.
Absolutely.
Understand? And strategic measures taken to oversee that whatever law is passed is enforced properly.
Absolutely.
Without corruption. But I'm going to move on to my poet. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
It's a pleasure once again to have you here.
Thank you.
Poetry.
Mm-hmm.
I've been a poet myself. A lot of people think we're lofty. When I say lofty, a lot of people think we don't really focus on factual things, but we're very dreamy. We want good things. You understand? The reason I'm making this point is I'm going to compare it to the state of our nation right now. We want to better our environments, to better our lives, but we kind of have a sense of grandeur, understand, which sometimes is hard to materialize in pragmatic ways. And sometimes I feel like our country is like one big poetry, you understand, in terms, in situations where there are so many ideals, there's so many laws being passed, there's so many things being said, but they end up just being ideas, and most of them end up just being, because we would say, for example, oh, look at what China has done, look at what Singapore has done. We had independence almost the same time with Singapore. They were able to mobilize themselves, they were able to do this and that, and then we'll sit and we'll say, oh, but our problem is this, oh, but our problem is that, and then 10 years later we'll maybe raise up the same conversation again, oh, look at what Singapore has done. As a poet, what would you say is your perspective, right, first and foremost, on the challenges, the way you see it from a poetic mind?
I think what we have in this country for the past 50-something years since we attained independence is we've had people in power who are incredible preachers, but not practitioners, right? If any of them stands and speak, you'll be like, yeah, this person has the greatest idea, but you put them in a place and say, fine, do it. They can't. And poetry is incredible because what we do is we take things and paint them in a little bit exaggerated way, right? To make things beautiful, right? And this is good. But what we have is we're in a situation where we're in a competition of who can speak better. This is what I'm saying, right? Because the policies that they were advocating, for example, when independence happened, the reason we're fighting for independence was because we wanted to be able to sustain ourselves, to rule our people according to our own laws, right? To make our own plans and run our own affairs.
Of course.
Over 30 years, one man did nothing. Another man said, this guy is horrible. He picked up a gun and kicked him out. In 22 years, he couldn't do any better, right? We said we are tired. We voted him out. The other man we voted in, who promised to live after 3 years, he said he wouldn't. And then instead of just staying for 5 years, he decided to form a political party. He didn't stop there. He went and colluded with the same party that we said was a dictator. Do you understand? Now, I'm a law student, and for example, the APRC has every right to form a coalition with any other political party, legally speaking. So the problem is not legal, it's moral.
Moral, yes,
right?
of course.
What kind of obligation do you owe to the people who brought you into power in the name of saving them?
Yeah.
Right? So we have a lot of questions that are uninterrogated.
Of course.
Right? And so if you ask me how can I characterize that, I would say the problem is not the country. The problem is not that we don't have money or resources. The problem is the people. We cannot fix this country unless we fix the people.
How do you feel we should fix the people? Okay, wait. Let's
There's a whole new discussion.
Let's hold that there, because right now we're speaking of the challenges.
Yes.
Before we go into the solutions.
Solution. Yes.
I wanted to make mention of something real quick. Politicians can be likened to poets in a way, because they say a lot of things.
They do.
You understand? They make things beautiful.
Yeah.
You understand? Where do you say they missed the point? Obviously, without not practicalizing it.
I think where they miss the point is this. I think where all of us miss the point, not just the politicians, because we put them there with our voice most of the time. Now, I'm not just talking about the president, but I'm talking about National Assembly members
and
local councils. We put them there. I was gonna come. I was waiting for the question about the dream of the Gambia. And I was gonna come from this from a very technical and intellectual point of view, right?
That's the lawyer side.
Yeah, that's the intellectual part of me.
Okay.
There's this guy called Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a Buddhist monk. He wrote this book called The Art of Living. In the second chapter of The Art of Living, he talked about a concept he called interbeing. Now, the concept of interbeing, according to Thich Nhat Hanh, is that none of us exist exclusively as individuals. We are extensions of everyone else. I'm an extension of my father. He's an extension of his great grandfather. Exactly.
Yeah.
So we are extensions of other people. He did not stop there. He talked about, and explaining the concept of interbeing, he borrowed something from this French psychologist that he called, for example, take the country or the world as one big living organism. That is what it is. Because the psychologist said it's like the human body, right? The human body is shared, rented, and occupied by different organisms. You have blood, you have bone, you have tissue, you have muscle, you have flesh, you have, brains. Anything you take out, the person dies. If any one of those organs has a problem, we say the person is sick, we take them to a hospital. Now, let's say the Gambia is a big living organism. Right? What are the vital parts? What are the vital organs of this country? The human beings, the young people, the economy, the laws, the schools. Now, if it is a human being, if let's say the heart fails or the heart has, you take them to the hospital and you fix it. Now what we have is, we have a country which is a big living organism. Now we had of that organism, which is the executive, which is sick. Instead of taking it to the hospital and fixing it, we have some people siding with it and defending its sickness. We cannot fix anything. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So this is where we are at, which is why if you talk about the problems, we will go round and round and round, but we'll come back to the same point.
The hamster's wheel.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the question is, how do we move from let's form a coalition to free our people, so we are not doing 3 years anymore, everybody's splitting up and doing what they wanted, so let's have
now you're going to solutions. That's the juicy part. We're gonna get into the juicy part. I have another one for you, another question for you.
Okay.
Again, politicians, the technicalities of, you mentioned something interesting of intellect. You mentioned intellect. So the technicalities of intellect, before I get into that, I'm going to use Senegal, our neighboring country Senegal, as an example. You see President Senghor, everyone knew President Senghor to be an intellect, right? And then you also mentioned moral, you understand? You have a situation where electing a leader, obviously there's a certain amount of intellect needed.
Needed, of course.
There's a certain amount of morality needed, you understand? How does one gauge how much intellect a person has, how much moral a person has, and the other necessary qualities? You understand? And how do the people aspire to learn how to elect people based off the amount of intellect that they have, the amount of morale that they have, understand, the amount of whatever credential that is needed. Understand what I'm trying to say? Because here, most of the time, electing leaders, let me say, electing leaders are done, by emotionally, by tribe, and there's so many, but people don't really focus on the fact that How intelligent is this person to lead us?
So here is what I'll suggest. I think the greatest problem we have in this country is the issue of we don't have enough political consciousness among our people to be able to make certain decisions. We'll get to that.
Basically,
part.
one second. Let's say, for example, there's a criteria that is created. For example, if you do not have a certain level of intellect, if you do not have a certain level of morality, just like you said, fix your bed.
Yes.
You can't even take part.
You cannot run.
Right. Can't even be a candidate.
Right. So let's get to the criteria first. We'll get there, right? So first of all, this is what we need to do. We need to be able to put these politicians through a process that can actually sort them out.
Yes.
So first, to know what a person's criteria, what a person's morality is like, there's an age limit.
Corruption.
Yes. You have to attain a certain age, and you don't live under a rock before you get to that age. So we can go back and check your track record to see what that is like, right? Another thing is, Omid, I don't know if you know this, but it is very easy to impress people with speech when no one is challenging it.
Yes.
When you're just given an opportunity to stand on a podium and speak freely, nobody is questioning or challenging what you're saying, it's easy to wow the crowd.
Of course.
Do you understand? I'm dope at this because it's what I do. I'm really good at it. Now, the thing is, we need to put in a process that questions what these people do. Do you understand? For example, when a politician stands with a manifesto and talk about their policies and what they will do, nobody asks them the step-by-step of how they're going to do it. Did you watch the debate between Dr. Sise and Halifa Saleh? At some point, that debate was very uncomfortable. Do you know why? Because questions about what is the step-by-step execution strategy you have for this plan were asked. And some people who came up with strategies could not defend them. They could not explain step-by-step how they can achieve that. So, you know, this is where we find out who can fix their beds. Do you understand? Because if you come and your bedroom is not fixed, we will ask you questions and you will have to answer. So we need to set in a process that will, for example, test that part. That will not test the morality part, but it will take your technical know-how and your intellect. It will take your technical know-how of how you think you will produce the results you say you will. Like I can come as a politician and say, if you vote me in within the first 3 years of my term, I will provide 300,000 jobs. How? And everybody will shout, yay!
And this is our problem.
Because nobody is questioning and challenging
asking the right question.
Do you understand? How are you going to do it? We will have to introduce the free market. It's capitalism. Nobody asks what capitalism is, or what the free market is, or what are the conditions under which we will operate. How will it work? Maybe I can even provide the 300,000 jobs, but at the cost of what?
What, exactly?
Do you understand?
Exactly.
So we need to put in a process that tests the intellect and technical know-how of these people, and we do not have that.
Now, is there a way, and this is an open question, is there a way, again, that's similar to the question that I asked you about electing the right people? Obviously, we all need to vote to get to that point. You understand? We all need to have a system of voting for people with a certain level of intellect, people with a certain level of morality, but we all as Gambians need to decide to create, to vote, to come up with a standard, you understand? A standard not only based on intellect or morale, but whatever we deem necessary. Again, like for example, the issue of corruption, you know, we need to be able to test people to see how honest they are. So if anyone is going to stand as a candidate, there needs to be a system of actually testing them. You know what I mean? Testing their, and obviously looking into their past, looking into their, you know, obviously them coming up. But obviously people have skeletons in their closets.
Yes,
you understand? And when people get into a position of power, some of those skeletons come up because now they're in a place where you can't really do nothing about their bad habits. Certain people are very good at hiding who they really are until they're in a position of power. When they're in a position of power, who's going to tell them you can't be this person that you really were a long time ago, but you really hit that person until you're in this position?
But that is why we have democracy. We're supposed to be able to tell them you cannot be this person in an office like that. Now let me tell you this, Omid, and I don't know, maybe you've heard it before. Power doesn't change anybody. It only reveals who you truly are. Do you understand? This is the issue we have. And maybe we cannot have an entirely corruption-proof process, because what we can do is we can try to minimize this as much as possible, but we cannot completely eliminate it. At some point, we cannot actually sort out through everything. But I think the issue is we have been electing so many bad leaders. Our process is flawed. The process is flawed, and I think it needs to be reviewed. We need to go through it again, and we have to.
We can only get to that by voting.
No, not the voting.
Only presidential.
Not the voting. Before we even reach at the voting level, the people who are vying for these positions, we need to put them through a process that will minimize all of the problems we have the moment they get into power.
From your understanding, is it possible to sack for the people to come together and decide to sack, let's say, a member of parliament?
Yeah, a member of parliament can be sacked by his people. He can be recalled.
No, let's say if the people, the population are
population
not
is
happy
with
with maybe the performance, yes, of a member of parliament.
The members of his constituency
Yeah.
can recall him.
Right.
Yes, there's a process for that.
And
the president, even the president, can be kicked out by a vote of confidence.
Of course.
You understand?
So, but come on, that is more, again, to listen back to the loftiness.
Political
This is very
consciousness.
practical.
The people look. I think the only way we change the
In these
country
parts
is
of the
for.
world, it's not very practical.
No,
is
it's
it?
actually it could be practical, but I think we will have to do a better
Look
work.
at, was it the president of France who stepped down after, no, it wasn't Sarkozy,
South Africa, you mean?
no, François Hollande, after the situation that happened,
Yes.
he willingly
Stepped
down.
Oh, it's Africa. They're not going to do that.
This is what I mean. Imagine people who, how can you kick out people who already have this mentality that this is my inheritance from the gods?
I think that is similar to that of Thabo Mbeki. Some times ago, I think there were a lot of oppressions going against Mugabe. So I think he was definitely aligning himself with Mugabe, not listening to the Western ideas or whatsoever. But then I think, if I'm right, when he knew that they were just about to impeach him, or I think he resigned. Thabo Mbeki as well. He also did the same thing.
I mean, don't forget, like, I've been to South Africa. A country like South Africa, obviously after apartheid, there's been a mix of ideals that are, I like the Afrikaners is Dutch, so there's a lot of European ideals mixed with. So obviously, the culture of resigning shouldn't be that so much of a foreign thing to them, compared to areas like West Africa,
Like
where,
the Gambia,
like the Gambia,
or
you
Senegal.
understand, where we live by the sword.
Something
Literally
like that.
not a sword. Again, I'm being poetic here.
Yeah.
But where we live by the iron fist, in a way. You understand? Where we feel like once we're in a position of power, all these little mini-me's don't really matter. But the little mini-me's are the ones that put them.
I think the problem we have is the past regime perpetrated a system with such brute force that even though it is out, that system is still persistent. And the people in power, right?
But this is why it's important for us to have these discussions now.
They're still operating by the same model. I'm not joking. If there are we just have a few such circumstances that we have to put in place. We just have a few things are clicking into place. If we have a few more things in place, Barrow is probably going to be worse than Yahya Jammeh.
Yes.
Do you understand? Because he has been testing the waters and he is getting away with a lot of things.
Yeah, a lot of things.
This is how the previous one started. He did not start by going, okay, let's shoot somebody, let's lock this person down. No, it started small.
Seeing what he could
Let's
get away
fire
with
someone and say what they're going to say. Okay,
Yeah.
nobody said anything.
Yeah.
Lock this one up for 5 months, no
And
trial.
see.
Let's
Yeah.
see. Nobody did anything.
Yeah.
Okay, slaughter them.
This is why
understand?
I'm very, let's say, inspired by CSOs like Gambia Participate.
Yeah.
Who are actually going out, suing some of these people,
Challenge the system.
challenging the system. You
Challenge the
understand?
system.
And we need more CSOs like that. Studio houses like Sahel that are actually bringing you uncut information. You understand what I'm trying to say? Against like whatever is wrong. Because we spoke earlier about biases. We had a young lady here, Kadi, who has a show about the ballot and everything. And she mentioned how there are journalists, for example, that take sides when it comes to political rallies and campaigns. Just as how we're talking about cases where there should be a standard for politicians, you understand? Technical know-how, morality, and so
forth, yeah.
For journalists as well, there should, even if you're going to take an oath, I believe journalists do take an oath that you cannot break, you understand? To be impartial to certain things.
All of that stuff.
You understand what I'm trying to say? But I feel the challenge we're facing at the moment, I mean, not everything about our politics is bad, no. The reason why we're having these discussions is not because, we're running with our woes 100% of the time, no. It's a progressive Gambia. Obviously, we're coming from a dictatorship. But we Gambians, we all know what we want now. And what we want is the Gambia that we did not want.
Exactly.
You understand? This is what we want. The Gambia that we did not want, that we fought so hard.
Wow.
And we don't want to go back to that Gambia. And it's good that with democracy, a lot of conversations are taking place. You know, a lot of initiatives are coming up, but we don't need to relent. And one of the things that we cannot relent on is voting, the power and the importance of voting the right people into power, whether at a presidential level, the national election level. And this is the conversation that we want to share with all our Gambian brothers and sisters. The importance of voting, learning, researching the right people to vote for, people with the technical know-how, people with the intellectual capacity, people with the moral balance. In fact, not even moral balance, with the moral surplus. You understand? To be able to run this country properly. Okay, we're gonna take a break and we're gonna come back and delve into details with the solutions.
Okay.
All right.